Welcome everyone, Questine here with a review / discussion about God of War on PC. I decided to go with this kind of style for this video instead of making some massively edited feature film for the sake of a review. I am in what is pretty much the central area of the game. It's the center of Midgard, which is one of the 9 realms. You don't have access to all of the 9 realms, but you do have access to a decent number of them. This is Midgard, one of the central areas of the game, and this lake is pretty much at the center of all of it. It is the largest area in the game by far, and it has the largest number of things you can do. It's generally focused on exploration, fighting enemies, finding things, finding secrets, finding loot. So, God of War. Well, it's been, lore-wise, it's been quite a few years, probably hundreds of years, ever since Kratos destroyed, or rather butchered, the entirety of the Greek pantheon. He realized vengeance wasn't all that it's cracked up to be, especially after the death of Pandora. He moved to the Norse Alliance. He found himself a lovely wife. He had the son, the boy, right here. And really, the way Kratos says "boy" has become such an iconic thing, in God of War. It's just the pronunciation, the weight behind it. I think Christopher Judge, who voices Kratos, does an amazing job with him. Like, he expresses emotion when he needs to, powerful emotion, but he's also just a gigantic douchebag, because that's who Kratos is at the end of the day. He is a douchebag. That's not something you can change. He's had this feel of revenge, but that doesn't mean he's a nice guy set on a path of redemption. He isn't, but he does regret the things he's done somewhat, to a certain extent. The people he killed, the people he butchered, the lives he's taken. There are things he does regret. Wait, didn't I yell with that? Interesting. Huh. Oh, this is one of the highest level areas in the game, and I'll explain it in just a bit. With one of the most difficult bosses in the game, but I'll explain it just a bit. So, how does the game work? Well, it's in many ways similar to Dark Souls, and I'm not just expressing it in terms of the combat system, because Dark Souls isn't about, like, oh, it's just a combat system. No, it's about an empty world where a lot of things have gone wrong. And it's a pretty much dead world. Undead are roaming the area, though in this case, in this particular playthrough, it's pretty much end-to-end, and I've killed everything that that's not friendly, which the vast majority of NPCs in this game, the vast majority of things you encounter are going to want to kill you. They're going to want to bite off your face, and so Kratos is gonna butcher his way through the 9 realms, or through the 9 realms that through the realms that you have access to in this game. But it's a world where things have gone wrong in many ways, and you're trying to figure out how exactly. It's a tale of discovery. It's a tale about Kratos, whose wife died, and Kratos and his boy trying to fulfill Mother's final wishes, which was for her ashes to be scattered from the highest peak in all the realms. Which initially they believe that highest peak is the one right there. Then you go there, and then you find this head, or rather the person. You find Mimir, who tells you, yeah, the highest peak isn't this. You're close, but the highest peak is in another place called Jotunheim. And then you have to find a way to Jotunheim. This area, it's just basically the end game area, like where you get to the end, and that's a long journey. But it's not about the story. It's about discovering who Kratos is, building the relationship between him and the boy, and also discovering what's been going on in this land, what this land is about, who the gods are, who the principal players are. It's about setup for God of War Ragnarok. That's all the story is really about. Everything else is just relationship material, drama, and all that kind of stuff between him and the boy primarily, but also other characters, relationship with Mimir, Freya, etc., other characters. It's about family in quite a few ways, and familial relationships and drama. Like Freya and her son Baldur. Baldur being the god whose death would mark the beginning of Ragnarok. And as you can see, snow is falling here. This is after the end of the main story. So winter has come. And it starts like now attack wise, now combat wise, I am just going to go to one of the other realms where I do have a guarantee of enemies, but combat wise you have your light attacks, your heavy attacks, you also have Runic Attacks. Runic Attacks are basically spells in their own way. So, for instance, that's a light Runic Axe attack. You have an axe, you have the Blades of Chaos, which you unlock later on. You also have ranged combat with both the axe and the Blades of Chaos. The axe is not there in this terms of this. You can throw the axe and then you can call it back and it will do damage. You also have the boy, who's an archer. Kratos is mainly a melee fighter, but does have some ranged attacks. The boy is your primary range power. Though, on this difficulty, and I'm playing on the highest difficulty, on this difficulty you can't just rely on the boy for your ranged firepower. You will need to use the entire arsenal that you have available. You will need to use your axe attacks. You will need to use the Blades of Chaos. You will need to also use your shield, because you also have a shield, which I'm just going to demonstrate. The temple that's in the middle here, you use it to travel to other realms once you unlock them. You need travel runes for that, so those are unlocked for the main story, or they're unlocked for exploring the world. You also have a shield. You can use it to block and parry. You also can evade, can dodge, double tap it, and you do a roll like that. So you have a dodge, you have a roll, you have a sprint. It does feel like Dark Souls. You don't have an Estus Flask, and oh boy would I wish. You do have health stones that are around the place, but they're not quite enough. And enemies will kill you pretty quick, at least on this kind of difficulty. You cannot build your character in such a way that you're going to die in more than 2-3 hits, even with some of the very best characters. Maybe if you stack yourself with defense all the way to the teeth, it would help, but then you'd lose a lot of combat power. So stats-wise, you have strength for standard attacks, auto attacks, basically, or standard attacks, normal attacks, light and heavy attacks. Then you have Runic for basically your special attacks, which increases both Runic attack and elemental damage. The Blades of Chaos have elemental damage, by the way, attached to them. Regular damage and also elemental damage. So does the axe, by the way. The axe also has elemental damage in some combos. You have combos with these. Then you have defense, which reduces the damage taken. But even with this high level of defense, and this is pretty high, you will still die very, very quickly. Vitality, which increases max HP and reduces the stagger you're going to have. Luck, which increases perk activation chance, increases HP, XP, and hack silver gain. I dislike this stat because tying the amount of money and experience you're gaining to a stat is fucking crap. But the perk thing is actually important because there's a lot of perks that have a chance, like for instance this Retribution Axe Handle. It's like low perk activation chance to strike with a massively damaging explosion on any successful hit. So if you increase this luck stat, you will have that happening more frequently. And then cooldown reduces the recharge time of Runic Attacks, Runic Summons, and Talismans. You also have Talismans, which basically they're a stat stick in quite a few ways, and quite a few of them do have an activated ability attached to them. And in this case, I'm using one that creates a circle on the ground that, well, let me just demonstrate this. Control caps lock and E. I use this and it puts the circle on the ground where I can't be interrupted at well. And more importantly, because I upgraded the talisman, it gives me HP. So there's a lot of things to consider. If there's any issue I would have with the combat system, it's this. On PC at least. They've tied together so many things. If I look on controls, they've tied together so many things with combos. So it may not be obvious necessarily from these combinations here, but for instance, let's say I want to do and this is something I need to go into change controls. So let's say I want to do a light Runic attack. Well, I need to hold down caps. Caps being my blocking my blocking key. It starts default as Q. I changed it to caps lock because I found it much easier. So I want to block. I have to hold down caps lock by default and also press the left mouse button. I can also use 3 and 4, but the problem with that is you lose some movement control when you're doing that. As opposed to if I hold down caps lock, I can maintain the full range of movement, so that'd be an S and D, while also being able to hold to do that. But you can, but they've tied together by default. A lot of things are tied together. Or hey, you shoot with the boy. Okay, that requires F. But you want him to use a special attack? That requires you to hold down F or whatever key you set it up on. You can change pretty much every bind to whatever you want, but some things are just, let's call them awkward. Some things do end up being awkward. I feel like so many things are, oh, tap your axe to get a certain effect. So for well, tapping is not too bad, but oh, hold down your attack button to get a special effect, special combo. Or if you delay, or oh, you can throw your weapon and then press a heavy attack to do something like that. There's a lot of possibilities here, a lot of intricacies, but I feel the controls aren't necessarily the best in the world. They're fine, don't get me wrong, they're fine. I've beaten this game on this high difficulty, and I didn't feel I hated my life doing so. It actually worked quite well. In fact, in terms of a Souls-like game, this probably has the best controls on mouse and keyboard, really. I think things feel very responsive, very appropriate for the most part. I just am annoyed by the key combinations I sometimes have to do, or by having to press certain buttons. You know, I think this is the kind of game where actually having one of those mice with a lot of buttons on the side, and I don't say this for a lot of games, but I think that this is absolutely one of those games where if you have one of those mice, one of that mouse that had a lot of side buttons, you could bind a lot of these things to it. Like, oh, you want the boy attacking or your runic attacks, and you can maintain your full range of movement. And I think that's pretty solid. I do find myself somewhat annoyed by that, but because, for instance, there I'm trying to get the screen and forward, trying to get my one forward to actually get this. It just feels awkward, but I guess getting this is good. One of the things you shouldn't believe, though, with this game is that somehow a controller is superior. It is not. Now, of course, I'm not doing a really good job here. I don't necessarily have the armor for this kind of hunter, for this main. I'll explain how this area works in just a bit. I'll explain how
I want to start heading to a mist-free area.
Plenty of time available ahead. That's the name Kratos uses. Okay. So that's the first. So those are some of the things you need to know. In terms of other things with regards to PC port, well, there are two other things to mention. So first off, graphics option. It's kind of brute forced approach, and the performance of the game is not necessarily the best. There is no GPU in the world that can run this game at a really good FPS, with the exception at more than, I'd say, 1440p, with the exception of the RTX 3080 and the RTX 3090. And I do call bullshit on that, because I don't think any game in the world should require that kind of GPU to run at more than 60 FPS, consistent 60 FPS. This game doesn't run on a consistent 60 FPS. Oh, and the best part is that's even if you use DLSS. And this is one of the things that does frustrate me. We seem to be entering an era where a lot of games are like, oh, you want good performance? Okay, you can get good performance if you're using something like DLSS or Fidelity FX Super Resolution, unless you're using that. But that's my frustration with it. You have to use some of this, and that's when you're going to get solid enough performance. On this RTX 2080 Super, it's mostly solid. I can't really complain too much. I do see FPS drops quite constantly in quite a lot of areas, but for the most part, it's fine. With DLSS, if I turn this off, I'm getting less than 40 FPS. I do not find, in certain areas, or certainly a consistent 50. On a computer like this, an i7-9700K, 16 gigs of memory, RTX 2080 Super, no, that is not acceptable. You can tell me whatever you want. Oh, this is an older generation. It's like, it's just a year older. Like, if this game had ray tracing, and I know the 2000 series has worse ray tracing performance than the 3000 series, I could accept that, but this is not ray tracing. This is a game without ray tracing. You don't have ray tracing options in this game. So yeah, I could accept that argument, but because the 2080 Super is not that far behind like the 3070. And having a great game requiring you to get the 3080 to play it at a solid 60 FPS, and even then, you would not be able to do it unless using DLSS. No, that is not an acceptable situation, as I see it. And yet, this is becoming more and more. I mean, don't get me wrong, DLSS is a great technology. I do greatly appreciate it, but I feel developers are using it more and more and more as a crutch for shitty optimization on
Have you considered a tactical retreat? You two don't look so good.
Ooh. There we go, almost back there now. So that's my issue with how things are. Now, as for the rest of the game, how does it play? So the story, yeah, it's a straightforward story, at least in terms of plot. It is a story about the characters and the relationships between characters, and the performances are really solid. Nothing to complain there. But what about the actual game? Well, you have several areas. You have Midgard, Alfheim, which is a pretty straightforward area as well. You go there, you clear it out once, and you're done pretty much. Everything that I did here, and I completed the vast majority of it, 96% completion, I did on my first run of this place. Very little after that. But then you have things like Helheim, Muspelheim, and Niflheim. Helheim is also pretty straightforward. Helheim and Alfheim are areas you have to do as part of the main story. You go to Helheim twice, both times as part of the main story. You complete the vast majority of things on those runs, and you're pretty much done with it. Midgard is a massive area, and the map doesn't necessarily reflect it, but this game has an enormous amount of verticality in it to deal with. This is not reflected in the map. The map is a lie in this game. Like, for instance, this mine area is a lot bigger than it seems here on the map. It's significantly bigger. In fact, this entire area here, this place here, is probably bigger or almost just the same size as, say, everything you explore, or no, most of what you explore in Alfheim. Though Alfheim can be pretty large in its own right. The map is misleading, and honestly, it's more useful in just seeing the basic geography of things, but this game has a lot of tunnels, twists, and turns. It's not really that great in terms of telling you, oh, which way you're gonna go. So you can't rely on the map to give you any kind of directions. Now, when you're in this game, so you can rush the main story, but if you play on this kind of difficulty on Give Me God of War, you're gonna get your ass handed to you. Because even if you defeat the regular enemies, you're going to encounter a boss fight or multiple boss fights, and you're just going to get stuck on them. Or you're going to have to reload checkpoints that happen during those boss fights to get past them. So you need to grind gear. Okay, other games do it as well. Like, oh, you need to do open world activities in order to get higher levels, gear, and all that to tackle the main story. Fair enough, Witcher does that. But here's the thing that's frustrating about God of War. you have this area, this Lake of Nine. It starts at the certain sea level, if you want to call it that, or certain water level, and it drops the more you do in the main story. But and opens up new areas, or even areas that exist already get more added to them, lower levels, if you will. But here's the problem. A lot of things in the open world, from the very beginning that you get access to it, are locked behind certain equipment, are locked, and you can only open it with certain equipment you find in the main story. So, for instance, you have a chisel, you have the boys' lightning arrows and light arrows, and they open up quite a lot in terms of open world exploration. And you just end up in this kind of situation where you're doing a lot of things just multiple times over and over and over and over again. Going back to the same area is just a lot of control. I mean, if you're playing on a lower difficulty, I guess it's not the same kind of issue, but I did find myself frustrated by this aspect. And I might be there because this deck of protection is not that great. Okay, almost dead. I got some protection here. So you have that. The Explorer, this game does push you towards exploration. Oh, you want more HP? Great. Go to the open world in certain side quest areas and find chests that require a puzzle to do, and you can get certain items that increase your max HP and max rate bar. Okay, that's fine. That's actually a fine aspect of the game. What is less fine is the tedium of having to go to the same area over and over again. And not because, oh, there's this entire new area that's opened if you have a certain key or anything like that. No, but because there's a chest you saw the last time you were there that you couldn't open unless you got certain items from the main story. That is frustrating. So that's something that's lacking in the open world. It does make itself navigating. It does make navigating the open world pretty annoying. Enemy type-wise, you have your Draugrs over here. You have Dark Elves, actually fighting here. And various beasts, mainly wolves, trolls are mainly minor bosses. They're the easiest type of bosses to deal with. And ogres are like kind of mini bosses, or at least what you would call them. I might die here. So that's how the game is in terms of you have your main story, you go to an area, then you get some tools, then that opens more stuff to find in the open world. You explore. You want to explore for experience. The way experience works is it's like a currency that you use to unlock certain skills. You actually spend it. I can't show you that because I've unlocked pretty much everything, but every one of these skills requires experience. It also requires a certain weapon level. So your axe starts as a level 1 and you upgrade it through items through the main story. Through things that you mainly acquire for the main story, with the exception of the final upgrade item, which you acquire from one of the optional areas. So if you want the highest level gear, you need to go to one of the optional areas. But weapons, they don't have their weapons don't have any kind of damage. They have strength. Like this one has 85 strength. The axe at the highest level, the Blades of Castle, level 5, highest level for them, give you 50 runic. And that's how things work. They give you stats. Everything is about stats. Stats. And so you need gear to increase your stats. And it's really through equipment. So, and it's armor, it's talismans, it's runes that also have a lot of stats added to them. It's all about statistics. For the boy, things are simpler. If you look at the boy's armor, which you can hear, you have various garbs. I find the sharpshooter garb to be the best one because it increases his arrow capabilities, and he's an archer. He's most useful as an archer, but he's also a melee fighter. He can stun enemies, he can choke them, he can do melee damage, he can give you health stones with a certain piece of equipment, though I prefer having him doing a lot of damage as an archer as opposed to trying to provide me health stone. I find them much more useful in that area, though maybe for certain bosses it would be more useful to have that. You need to be flexible. You can't just go with a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to use different paths, different pathways, different gear pieces of equipment, different talismans, different armor pieces as well. So for instance, in this area, Niflheim, what I really should be doing is using this, the Pauldrons of the Deadly Mist, because the way this area works is it's a curse on a timer. This increases the timer. This armor is specifically designed for this area. It's also the best armor we can get realistically by the end of the game. The armor I'm actually using, the Valkyrie armor, that's a post-end game armor. This is the New Game Plus armor in a sense. Like, this is the armor that you want to get to play on New Game Plus. There is a New Game Plus mode. I started playing it. I'm gonna finish it. But this is armor you build not to do anything in the actual base game, but do things in the New Game Plus. The armor used for the base game is Ivaldi's set, or the Smoldering Brimstone set, or armors basically from Niflheim or Muspelheim. Now, here's the thing that I want to say. So, story straightforward. You go to one area, and then another area, explore. You get.
I don't know what we're still doing here.
And that's fine. And then you have exploration in the open world. That's something you're encouraged to do for the sake of gear, equipment, currencies. Okay, that's good. Minus the tedium of having to go to areas again and again and again just for individual chests that are locked behind pieces of equipment. For the most part, it's fine. Here's where things fall apart from my perspective. The fucking endgame. And what do I mean by the endgame? There are two things that are part of the endgame, optional endgame, beyond the main story. You have Valkyries. These are very difficult boss fights, culminating in one major boss fight here at the Council of Valkyries, which is Sigrun. Let me just show you what Sigrun is, because I think I may have a save, though maybe not. Let's actually try. No. Oh, actually I do have, may have one, yeah. So let me just show you what Sigrun is as a boss fight. So you have to understand, because you have to see this to understand it, to fully appreciate it. And she's a completely optional boss, but she is something else compared to any other boss. So the gear I have here is very similar to what I have. I don't have the axe handle that I had there because you actually get it from killing her. But I have pretty much everything else, with the exception of the armor set. But I do have the armor, but I can't upgrade it. Upgrading it would be painful. I'll get to that in a moment. But you have Valkyries that are unlocked rooms. You get an item to unlock those rooms. And then once you kill the other Valkyries, you bring their helmets here, and then you face Sigrun. Now this boss fight took me 200 tries because you need to master every single one of your attacks. And she can be pretty difficult to deal with. Okay.
Some hell.
And yeah, put me in right there. Now granted, I'm not really paying attention to the boss fight, but you can die very quickly. And this is with some of the very best gear in the world, with fully unlocked equipment, all that kind of stuff. Again, 200 tries, A boss fight that makes most of the mythic bosses in World of Warcraft seem easy. Well, not easy necessarily, but you would absolutely give them, most of them, a run for their money, with only things like Kill Jaden Mythic or something along those lines being harder, I feel. She's a boss with numerous attack patterns. She combines them. That's the worst part about it. It's like, oh, she can be doing a dive attack, and then then she'll do a charge attack on you, and you don't necessarily see it coming. You need to learn every single possible variation of the attacks that she's going to use against you. And she's the hardest boss in the game. She's the optional difficult boss fight that you have here. You want to do her because she unlocks materials for you to be able to upgrade all the other stuff that you've gotten from other Valkyries, like the Chorus and all that. But here's the problem with all of this. Doing the Valkyries is fine. Doing all the steps required to unlock them is fine. You need to go to various areas, including completing the entirety of the Muspelheim challenges. Muspelheim is like an arena fight area. You have various arena challenges to deal with. Easy and normal, and you're climbing up a mountain. Once you get to the top, you fight a Valkyrie, one of the more difficult ones, actually. Niflheim is a maze, a randomly generated maze, but you do have a Valkyrie at a specific spot in it. When I say randomly generated, the layout is the same. The enemy types are going to be different, the traps are going to be different, the chests are going to be different, and the rewards are randomly. All that is randomly generated, and you can't save. You can save at any point from most of the game. You cannot save while doing Niflheim, while you're in the Niflheim maze, until you're in a safe spot. And that's fine for a while, but here's the issue. Let me explain what the real issue is, and I'll just actually show you. All the armor you get, or the vast majority of the armor, the equipment, all that, you craft it. You craft it using reagents. Well, here's the issue with the endgame armor. This one, not necessarily so much. The Ivaldi stuff, not so much. Not as much of a problem, because Ivaldi stuff is actually associated with one of the areas. So getting it and crucially upgrading it to level 3 is not an insane. You do need to do the maze several times, but here's the thing.
What's it gonna be this time?
In order to actually upgrade this stuff, you require a lot of fucking reagents. So for instance, I need, for the Chorus, I need a lot of hack silver, which is your basic currency. Then I need Asgardian steel, which drops from Valkyries. Perfect Asgardian steel, which drops from some of the more difficult Valkyries. Mist echoes as well, which you get from the maze. And on and on and on and on. Okay. But here's the frustrating aspect here in all of it.
Sorry you wasted my time.
You've beaten a significant... Once you get to this level of trying to upgrade it, things become ridiculously expensive. So you need a lot of hack silver. How do you get it? Well, the most reliable method is doing the Niflheim maze. Dozens upon dozens of times. If you think that's fun, no. It isn't. It absolutely is a fucking painful... It's a pain in the neck to have to do this place again and again and again and again just to get money. Just for fucking money. I hate it when RPGs do it. This game does it as well. The Witcher 3 did it. You know which game didn't do this kind of shit? Dark Souls. Yeah, this game is not trying to mimic, but it's certainly copying a whole fucking lot from. Dark Souls didn't do it. You play Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. You want to get the best equipment? 1 or 2 sets? It's not going to be an insufferable grind to do it. Some things might be. Some things might be annoying, but it's not going to involve crap like this. This is painful. Like, I think I spent about 8 hours or so dealing with Sigrun, the boss I just showed. I think I spent easily 4 or 5 hours just farming fucking currency, and it's not just currency you need. No. Niflheim and Muspelheim, these two endgame optional areas, optional my ass if you want to deal with the Valkyries and get their gear. But Niflheim also has its own reagents, which are randomly generated. Yay! So, and then you get them from the randomly generated chests in the randomly generated mazes. So enjoy doing that over and over and over again. But that's not even the worst part. I might complain about Niflheim. Niflheim is a breeze compared to the bullshit that Muspelheim is. So here's how Muspelheim works. You have arenas. You have trials, as they're called it. You have easy trials, normal trials. You have to do both easy and normal to get to the highest level and unlock the Valkyrie. But then this is where the bullshit comes in. Once you do that, you unlock a sword at the top of the mountain once you kill the Valkyrie. This sword will give you impossible trials. You do those, you get chests that may, and I emphasize the may aspect here, the random bullshit here, that may have a chance to give you greater crests of flame. What are those? Let me just actually find it in my inventory. Greater. These are used to craft armor, pummels, talisman with the powers of primordial flame. Basically, some of the best gear in the fucking game requires you to get a lot of these, a good amount of these. And they're not a guaranteed drop from anything except a trial that requires free keys. So the way Muspelheim works is once you've beaten the easy and normal trials, you get impossible trials, which you can do over and over again. They also, each of them gives you a chest that may have some of those greater crests, may not have. My advice, by the way, is you can save before opening, after you completed the trial, after you complete an impossible trial, you can save and reload every single time until you get actually what you want, the greater crest. That's what you're looking for. But then, once you get free keys from those impossible trials, and honestly, they're tedious as all hell. They're not even that difficult. They're just tedious crap. It's like, oh, it's a challenge mode. You have to do a fight with enemies in a certain way. You have a limited time, or you need to kill enemies to increase the time you have, or enemies have a large amount of regenerating HP, or something like that. Bullshit stuff. Let me call it that. It's easy in terms of killing the enemies. It's just frustrating as all hell because the challenge modes are actually bullshit in their own right. But here's the thing. You get those free keys, and then you go to the top of the mountain, and you have a chance at doing a trial at the top of the mountain, which is a challenge mode in its own right, and has bronze, silver, and gold medals, depending on how well you do. If you get gold, you get the guarantee at the very good resources that you fucking want. Now, this whole process, this endgame process of grinding gold, silver, hack silver, grinding resources to craft this item, to craft this stuff, it's tedious bullshit. Now, you might say, oh, you don't need to do it, Costin. It's not really that difficult to get, like, say, a Valdi set and some other good items and using them to finish the game. Yeah, you're right, but you know, let's say I want to play New Game Plus, then I obviously want to, say, upgrade the cuirass of the Valkyries. I want to upgrade certain talismans and all that. Oh, and for the things in New Game Plus, for the items in New Game Plus, I have to do everything that I've done so far again to get those reagents again. That is horrible. Like, up until that point, I had really enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the challenge of the Valkyries. I actually enjoyed throwing myself against Sigrun, though you can make the argument that a boss fight of that nature, which is extremely more difficult than any other thing in the game, is not necessarily the best way to do a game like this. I'm not necessarily fond of having a very difficult boss fight that is on an insane level compared to everything else. I'm not against difficulty. I am against insane difficulty spikes. I really dislike them. And that's exactly what Sigrun is. She is an insane difficulty spike for which you're not prepared for, and you're going to spend an enormous time trying to figure out. It feels great when you do it. I cheered like a madman when I did it, but it can feel frustrating getting to that point. But that was fine. You know, if it had just been that was fine. The tedium of having to go back and all that, fine. But having to do Niflheim and Muspelheim over and over and over and over and over and over again for fucking currency and resources, that really took a lot of the joy I had out of this game. So if there's an issue, is that the end game, the quote-unquote optional end game, is absolute dog shit. I'm not talking about the Valkyries, I'm not talking about exploration, I'm talking about Muspelheim, Niflheim, and the way they handled it. At least the developers gave you a way to generate infinite resources, yay, but the way you do it, the things you have to do, is just terrible. But up until that point, the game is pretty solid. So I would hope at one point there's a mod that gets added that just gives you these resources. I'm sure there will be at one point mods just for resources. Witcher has that for coin if you want. So hopefully this game will get that, because it really sucks a lot of the joy having to do that if you want to upgrade your gear. I was not looking to upgrade 4 sets of gear. I just wanted to upgrade the Valkyrie set. You know, the thing I actually busted my ass to actually acquire from these fucking Valkyries, which are extremely difficult bosses. You know, the war I spent so much time, I wanted to just upgrade it. Well, you need a lot of hack silver for that. And that really sucked a lot of the joy out of it. But that's where I stand on God of War. It's a good game. Let me be clear on this. Regardless of anything I've said in this video, it is a good game. It's a very enjoyable game. It's a game you pick up, you enjoy from the moment you start it. You get it. It does have some really bad elements from as far as I'm concerned, but for the most part, it's a good game. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.